I've been driving for a living since I was 22. Deliveries, long hauls, local runs. Whatever kept the bills paid. I was used to lonely roads and long nights, but that Tuesday night on Route 117 was different. It was just past midnight when I left the last drop off, heading toward a small diner 30 miles out. I knew the road well enough, a narrow, two-lane highway slicing through dense pine forest. No houses, no lights, just endless trees pressing close to the shoulder. The night air was cold, and my heater wasn't working properly, so I drove with my jacket zipped up, one hand wrapped around a thermos of lukewarm coffee. My headlights stretched far ahead, carving tunnels of pale light through the fog drifting low over the asphalt. The radio crackled with static, cutting in and out. As I drove deeper into the stretch, I switched it off eventually. The silence pressed in. It wasn't comforting silence either. It was the kind where you feel like something's waiting just outside the glow of your headlights. After about 10 minutes, I saw a faint glow appear behind me. Headlights. I didn't think much of it at first. It wasn't uncommon to see the occasional late-night driver out here, though they were few and far between. But something about the way those headlights behaved made my stomach knot. They stayed at a perfect distance behind me for several miles, never getting closer, never falling back. When I sped up, they matched me exactly. When I slowed down, they adjusted too. I told myself it was coincidence, but I couldn't shake the prickling sensation crawling across my shoulders. Then, after another 3 minutes, I glanced back in the mirror again. The headlights were gone. I told myself it was nothing, maybe they'd turned off onto a side road I hadn't noticed. But I knew there weren't any exits for another 8 miles. I drove faster, gripping the wheel until my knuckles whitened, trying to convince myself I was just tired. That's when the headlights reappeared. Not far behind this time. So close, I could almost see the shape of the vehicle, or at least, I thought I should be able to. But there was nothing there except light, bright and blinding, hovering too high off the road to belong to any normal car. I blinked hard, squinting at the mirror, and in the second it took me to refocus, they were gone again. The silence in the car was suffocating now. Even my breathing sounded too loud. I reached for my phone. No bars. Not even one. I kept driving, hoping desperately for some sign of civilization, but the further I went, the thicker the fog became. It clung to the hood of my car, crawling over the windshield like smoke. My wipers squealed against the damp glass. Then something darted across the road. I slammed on the brakes, my chest hitting the steering wheel as the tires screamed against the pavement. I stared into the dark, but there was nothing. No animal, no person. Just wet asphalt and endless fog. And then, behind me, those lights flared one more time, this time much closer than before. When I saw the neon sign through the fog, I almost cried with relief. A tiny gas station stood alone at the side of the highway, its single light flickering like it hadn't been serviced in decades. I pulled in, parked near the pumps, and killed the engine. The silence was absolute. I got out, expecting to hear the usual hum of distant traffic or maybe the chirping of crickets, but there was nothing. No insects, no wind, no sound at all. Inside the station, it was worse. The shelves were stocked but coated in a thin layer of dust, like no one had touched them in years. A lone ceiling fan spun lazily above, but it made no sound. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding too loud in the stale air. No response. I walked behind the counter, looking for a clerk, but the stool was empty. Then I noticed something strange. A set of footprints on the dusty tile floor. They led from the entrance, past the counter, and around the back hallway before stopping abruptly at the door that opened onto the woods behind the station. The door was slightly ajar, and the footprints didn't come back. I didn't care about the gas anymore. I bolted out the door, sprinted to my car, and peeled out of the station. My breathing was ragged, my chest tight with panic. But I just kept driving, faster and faster. The fog swallowed everything. My headlights barely lit the pavement beneath me. Then I saw them again, the lights, hovering just above the tree line, keeping pace with me. I stared at them until my vision blurred, until I realized they weren't headlights at all. They were too high, too silent, too bright, and then gone. I blinked, trying to focus on the road ahead, but the asphalt seemed different now. The paint markings faded, the trees thicker, the air heavier. My GPS still read 20 miles to the diner, but no matter how far I drove, the number never changed. The last thing I remember before everything went black was seeing those lights one final time reflected in my windshield. They weren't behind me anymore. They were right above. I'd been on the road since dawn, heading west for a work project I didn't really care about. Highway 56 cut straight through a stretch of nothingness, dry fields, broken fences, and the occasional forgotten farmhouse. By the time the sun dropped below the horizon, I was too tired to keep my eyes open. When I saw the flickering neon sign, Mile Marker Motel, I decided to stop for the night. The place looked abandoned. The parking lot was cracked, weeds pushing through the concrete. Only one other car sat in the far corner, covered in dust. I grabbed my bag from the passenger seat and walked inside. The lobby lights were dim, and the air was damp with the smell of mildew. A small bell sat on the counter, so I rang it. A man appeared from the back office. He was thin, pale, with sunken eyes that didn't quite meet mine. He didn't greet me. He didn't smile. He just slid a sign and sheet toward me and said, in a low, flat voice, "Cash only." I handed him $60. "Room 7, he said, dropping a key on the counter. When I asked if there was Wi-Fi, he didn't answer. I should have left. Room 7 smelled like wet carpet and old cigarettes. The wallpaper peeled at the corners, and the single overhead light buzzed faintly. I kicked off my shoes, dropped my bag on the chair, and sat on the bed. The mattress sank unevenly, springs creaking beneath the weight. I turned on the TV, but it just displayed static. My phone was no better, no bars, no data, nothing. I laid back and stared at the ceiling, trying to relax. That's when I heard its soft, muffled voices drifting through the vent above the bed. I sat up, straining to listen. At first, it sounded like two people having a quiet conversation in the next room. A man and a woman, whispering rapidly, their words too soft to make out. I leaned closer to the vent. The voices stopped instantly. I walked to the window, pulled back the curtain, and looked outside. The parking lot was empty. No other cars. No other guests. By 2:30 a.m., my nerves were shot. The whispers returned, growing louder, more urgent, as though dozens of voices were murmuring at once. I opened the door to the hallway. The carpet was damp beneath my bare feet, and the air smelled faintly metallic, like rust or blood. Room 5, Room 7, Room 9. That was when I noticed there was no Room 6 or Room 8. Just gaps in the hallway where doors should have been. I walked to the far end, where the dim bulb above flickered. There was a single door there, older, heavier, padlocked shut. A faded sign was bolted above the frame. Authorized personnel only. I pressed my ear against the door. I heard breathing. Slow, heavy breathing. And then, suddenly, the voices started again, but this time, they were right behind me. I turned around fast. The hallway was empty. I ran back into my room, grabbed my bag, and bolted for the parking lot. The night air hit me like ice, but something was wrong. The motel looked older. The walls were crumbling, the windows shattered, and the roof sagged like it hadn't been maintained in decades. I sprinted to my car, jammed the key into the ignition, and peeled out onto Highway 56. I drove until my hands cramped on the wheel. Mile marker 54, mile marker 55, mile marker 56, then the motel again, exactly as I'd left it. I drove faster again and again. No matter which direction I turned, I ended up back at mile marker 56. The last time I saw the sign, it wasn't flickering anymore. It glowed bright and steady, and beneath the words "Mile Marker Motel" was something new. My name. Room 7 reserved for my name. That's when the voices started again. This time, they weren't whispering, they were calling me by name. The highway had been dead for hours. No other cars, no streetlights, no billboards, just black asphalt cutting through a wasteland of trees. By 12:17 a.m., I was starving and running on fumes. When I saw the faded neon sign for Lydia's Diner glowing faintly through the fog, I pulled off without thinking. The diner sat by itself off exit 43, surrounded by darkness. Its parking lot was cracked and littered with leaves, weeds sprouting between the concrete slabs. A single rusty pickup truck sat parked near the side, its windshield coated in grime. I killed the engine and stepped out into the damp night air. The place looked old, but it wasn't abandoned. The open sign in the window flickered lazily, and I could smell faint traces of fried food even from the parking lot. When I walked inside, a bell above the door jingled softly. The diner was empty. Every booth was vacant, every stool at the counter untouched. A small jukebox in the corner sat silent, its lights dead. I slid onto a stool at the counter, glancing around. There were plates stacked neatly by the kitchen window, menus on every table, and a pot of coffee on the warmer. Still steaming gently, I called out, "Hello?" No answer. Somewhere in the back, a door creaked open and shut. I waited at the counter for 5 minutes before getting up to look around. The booths were spotless except for one near the back corner. 2 plates sat there, untouched, but still warm. A plate of pancakes on one side, scrambled eggs and bacon on the other. Forks rested neatly on folded napkins, and 2 half-full glasses of orange juice sat beside them, condensation still clinging to the glass. Someone had been eating here recently. I stepped back to the door and checked the parking lot again. Only my car. Only the dusty pickup. No sign of anyone leaving. When I came back inside, the pot of coffee on the counter was gone. I froze where I stood, scanning the counter, the booths, the kitchen door. That's when I heard a faint sound coming from the ceiling vent, something like soft humming, barely audible over the diner's silence. I called out again, "Is anyone here?" No response. Then the jukebox in the corner clicked on by itself, playing an old, scratchy country song. I stepped into the kitchen, pushing through the swinging door. The air was colder back here, damp and still. Stainless steel counters gleamed under flickering fluorescent lights, and the tiled floor was perfectly clean, almost unnaturally so. Everything was neatly arranged. Pans stacked, knives lined up, shelves full of canned goods perfectly labeled. But something didn't fit. The grill was spotless, like it hadn't been used in weeks. I turned slowly until I faced the walk-in freezer door. It was massive, solid, steel, with heavy bolts locking it shut from the outside. That's when I heard it, a dull, rhythmic thumping. I froze, listening. Thump. Pause. Thump. I stepped closer, pressed my hand against the door, and felt the faint vibration beneath my paw. I leaned closer and pressed my ear to the cold metal. Breathing slow, deep, deliberate. I stumbled back, heart pounding, and nearly knocked over a tray of stacked glasses. When I turned toward the door, the humming from the vent stopped instantly. The diner went completely silent. I ran out of the kitchen and back through the diner, my footsteps pounding against the tiled floor. The jukebox had stopped again. When I shoved open the front door, I froze. The parking lot was full. At least 30 cars set neatly in rows, coated in a fine layer of dust, doors hanging open. I spun around, scanning the diner windows, the dark tree line beyond the lot. No movement, no sound. I bolted to my car, slammed the door, and started the engine. The headlights cut through the fog as I tore back onto Highway 12, speeding past the exit ramp. But 2 miles later, a sign appeared on the side of the road. Exit 43. Lydia's Diner. Drove faster. Another 2 miles, another sign. Exit 43. Lydia's Diner. Kept driving until my gas tank was nearly empty. Finally, I turned on the radio, hoping for news, weather, anything to ground me. Every station played the same static-filled country song I'd heard on the jukebox. The chorus looped endlessly, over and over. Don't stop driving, just keep moving on. There ain't no leaving when the highway's gone. I haven't seen another car in hours, but the sign for exit 43 just appeared again. I left the conference later than I should have, thinking I could make it home before a.m. Didn't want to spend another night in a cheap hotel, so I decided to push through the drive. Highway 94 was quiet at that hour. No cars, no lights, no signs of life for miles. The only thing breaking up the darkness was the faint green glow of my dashboard. I was sipping cold coffee when my GPS chirped and rerouted me. Faster route found. Turn right onto Service Road 9. I hesitated but followed the instructions. The road narrowed quickly, and the pavement looked older than the main highway. Faded paint, cracked shoulders, potholes scattered everywhere. My radio cut out. My phone dropped to no signal. I didn't think much of it at first, but by the time I hit mile to 141, something felt wrong. I glanced in the rearview mirror. Nothing. No headlights. No taillights. No one. I'd been driving another 20 minutes when my headlights caught movement on the shoulder ahead. At first, I thought it was an animal, but as I got closer, I realized it was a woman. She stood barefoot on the damp gravel, wearing a long white dress that clung to her legs in the humidity. Her arms hung limply at her sides, her head tilted slightly downward. I slowed the car and rolled the passenger side window halfway. "Ma'am, are you okay? Do you need help?" She didn't look at me, she didn't move, she just stared past me, into the trees. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. Something about the way she was standing was wrong. I eased off the brake and drove on, checking the rearview mirror. She didn't turn to watch me leave. 5 minutes later, I rounded a curve, and there she was again. Same white dress, same bare feet, same motionless stance. This time, she was under a sign that read, "Mile to 49. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, heart pounding, and made a U-turn as carefully as I could, but after 5 minutes of driving back, I realized something was off. This wasn't the same road. The asphalt had changed, broken, cracked, worn down like it hadn't been driven on in decades. The yellow dividing lines faded into rough gray stone. I checked my GPS again, but it was frozen. The map stuck mid-spin. Reading only. Searching for route. I turned the radio back on. Static. Nothing but static. I sped up, desperate to find another car, a street sign, anything. That's when I saw it, a battered green marker on the side of the road. Mile to 41. I drove faster. Another 10 minutes later, there it was again. Mile to 41. Everywhere I went, no matter how far I drove, I kept passing the same damn sign. And that's when I saw her again, standing directly beneath it, barefoot, white dress. This time, her head was turned and she was looking right at me. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, heart pounding, and made a U-turn as carefully as I could. But after 5 minutes of driving back, I realized something was off. This wasn't the same road. The asphalt had changed, broken, cracked, worn down like it hadn't been driven on in decades. The yellow dividing lines faded into rough gray stone. I checked my GPS again, but it was frozen. The map stuck mid-spin. Reading only. Searching for route. I turned the radio back on. Static. Nothing but static. I sped up, desperate to find another car, a street sign, anything. That's when I saw it, a battered green marker on the side of the road. Mile to 41. I drove faster. Another 10 minutes later, there it was again. Mile to 41. Everywhere I went, no matter how far I drove, I kept passing the same damn sign. And that's when I saw her again, standing directly beneath it, barefoot, white dress. This time, her head was turned, and she was looking right at me. The first time I saw the sign for mile marker 313, I didn't think much of it. It was just another green metal number on a cracked stretch of highway that seemed to go on forever. I'd been driving for nearly 9 hours straight, somewhere deep in the back roads of northern Arizona, trying to shave hours off my trip by avoiding the interstates. By the time I rolled up on the last gas station before the highway opened into black nothingness, the sun had long disappeared. The building looked like it hadn't been renovated since the 70s. Flickering fluorescent lights, dusty windows, and an old metal sign swinging weakly in the wind. The parking lot was empty except for a single, beat-up Ford truck that looked abandoned. Inside, a lone cashier sat behind the counter. An older man, maybe in his late 60s, with deep lines carved into his face and pale, washed out eyes. He barely looked up when I walked in. The air smelled faintly of mildew and old gasoline. I grabbed a bottle of water and a bag of chips and placed them on the counter. That's when he finally really looked at me, and spoke in a voice so low and gravelly I had to lean in to hear him. "You driving east?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, trying to make it to Holbrook before midnight. He shook his head slowly. "Best turn around and find somewhere else to stop. You don't want to be out there past 12. I half smiled, thinking it was some local superstition. "Why?" "Bad roads, cops." His pale eyes flicked toward the dusty window behind him, where the empty highway stretched into blackness. He leaned in closer. "No cars, no lights, no sound," he whispered. "Once you pass 313, it's just you and them." I wanted to laugh, but something about the way he said "them" froze my throat. He stared at me for an uncomfortably long time, then slid my receipt across the counter without another word. As I stepped back outside, the air felt heavier, thicker somehow. The parking lot was dead silent. I glanced at my phone. No signal. I brushed it off, got into my car, and pulled back onto the highway. For the first few miles, everything seemed normal. The rhythmic hum of my tires, the occasional flash of a road sign, the dull glow of my dashboard lights. But then I realized something that made my stomach tighten. In nearly 20 minutes, I hadn't seen a single other vehicle. The farther I drove, the more wrong everything felt. At first, it was small things. The mile markers didn't seem right. I'd passed 307, then 309, then somehow 308. My GPS had frozen on a blank gray screen, stuck loading without a signal. I kept checking my phone, turning it on and off, but it was useless. By now, I should have seen at least one other set of headlights, but the road behind me was pitch black, an endless void. No semis, no patrol cars, not even distant taillights. Then, around mile marker 312, I saw something ahead, a faint pair of red taillights far down the stretch. Relief washed over me, and I pressed the accelerator slightly, glad to know I wasn't completely alone out there. But when I finally reached where I thought the car had been, there was nothing. No exit, no turnoff, just the same cracked highway stretching endlessly ahead. I told myself I was tired, my eyes playing tricks on me, but my chest was tight and my hands were sweaty against the wheel. Then I noticed the shape. It was small, maybe the size of a person, standing at the very edge of the highway near the next mile marker. At first, I thought it was just a reflector post, or maybe a hitchhiker, but as my headlights washed over it, I saw it shift slightly, like it was turning toward me. I slowed down, squinting, but by the time I got closer, the thing was gone. Just empty pavement. I told myself to stop freaking out, rolled the window down, and let the cool desert air hit my face. I cranked up the radio to drown out the silence, but every single station was nothing but static. That's when I glanced at the rearview mirror. For a fraction of a second, I saw something sitting in my back seat, a pale, flickering figure, hunched, motionless, head tilted slightly. I whipped around, heart hammering, but the seat was empty. The only sound was my own ragged breathing and the endless hum of my tires. I finally saw it up ahead, the weathered green sign for mile marker 313. The numbers were faded, barely visible under my headlights, but the second I passed it, my stomach dropped. The air felt heavier, thicker, like I'd driven into another layer of reality. That was when the noises started. At first, just a faint tapping, like someone gently drumming their fingers on the roof. I slowed down, straining to listen, and the sound stopped immediately. Then came the whispering. It wasn't words, not exactly, just low, muffled voices under the hum of my engine. I turned off the radio completely, rolled down the windows, but the whispering only got louder. I gripped the wheel tighter, trying to focus on the road, when something darted across the asphalt ahead of me. I slammed the brakes, tires screeching, heart pounding. It looked human, but too pale, too thin, like a body drained of blood. It crawled into the darkness on hands and knees, moving unnaturally fast. I was shaking, every muscle in my body screaming to turn around, to get off this road, But when I tried to reverse, the highway behind me was gone. There was nothing. No pavement, no signs, no lights, just endless, black emptiness. I was trapped. I don't know how long I've been driving. Dashboard clock froze at 12:17. My phone died hours ago. I haven't seen another car, another building, another sign of life since mile marker 313. Except for them. They're lining the highway now, pale shapes standing perfectly still, shoulder to shoulder, all facing the road. Some look human, some don't. Every time I pass one, I feel their heads turn slowly, following me. The whispering hasn't stopped. It's inside the car now, vibrating through the speakers even though the radio is off. Sometimes it sounds like my own voice. Then, up ahead, I saw the green sign again. Mile marker 313. I slammed the brakes, tires squealing, but when I looked behind me, the road was empty. No sign of the figures, no lights, just darkness stretching forever. I'm still driving. I don't know if I'll ever stop. If you ever find yourself on Highway 89, somewhere past the last gas station, don't pass mile marker 313, because once you do, they'll know you, and they'll never let you leave.